Last week on part 1 of episode 1 on learning to drum.
So welcome to the show, and if you don't know anything about the drums, this is the place to start from. I'm going to teach you linearly from ground zero to beyond on the very fundamentals of drumming. Really, drums or percussion, we can call it percussion, are broken into two separate categories. One, idiophones, and the other, membranophones. That's one thing that you have to have in order to play anything or do anything in life, is have a passion for it. All right, Kai, now first what we're going to have to do is let the people know what they need to buy. And I had mentioned, don't buy a drum, save your money, spend as little as possible to make sure that this is something that you want to do. And that is that of a practice pad and a pair of drumsticks. And I had the same for you, right, Kai?
Right. Okay.
And two, and whoa. By all means, go visit your local music store or drum shop and pick out a pair of sticks today. Consider it your very first rhythm lesson. And remember, the special clap is going to be 1 and 2 and 3. Okay? Are you ready? I'll count it off and let's see if we can clap this stuff away. Here we go. Ready? 1 and 2 and ready and go. And 1 and 2 and 3. Hey!
Whoa, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. We got all kinds of practice pads here. Old ones, some new ones. So there are all kinds of different practice pads out there to choose from. And I know you might be saying to yourself, well, which one is right for me? There's really no right or wrong answer. Again, if you're on a budget, I would consider something that's on the cheaper side. There are practice pads out there that run up to, $100, even $200 in some cases, but I don't recommend spending that type of money on your very first practice pad. Speaking of very first practice pad, this pad is a pad that resembles the one that I first bought at River Road Shopping Center in St. Louis, Missouri. That was one of the well-known shopping malls of its day, and I went into the music store that had pianos, guitars, all kinds of things, and I asked them if they had any things with drums, and of course they had a set up, but this was exactly like the pad that I bought. It's designed, originally I thought I would be playing this way on the pad with the slant face towards me, because when I first started playing at 10 years old, I had the match grip. Really what it's for is for a slant that you can use as you're playing, and I don't think you can see that here, maybe the top camera there can, but it would fit into your leg like that, and you can play in your lap, or you can put it on the table and face it the other way. And so you'd still have that slant that most drummers liked to play in the early part of the 1900s and even prior to that. And that slant emulated the drum on a sling, and so most people, as a matter of fact, all people back prior to the 60s pretty much played traditional grip. And we'll talk about that in the next episode. The history of the practice pad goes back a long way. The earliest I can find is from 1919 with a H.A. Bauer, and that was patent number, and you can see there on the screen. As you can see here in the patent, superimposed on the base is a layer of resilient sound insulating material, such as felt, that is said insulating material constituting a support or cushion for which might be termed a sounding board, which in the present embodiment of the invention consists of rather thin plate which may be formed of gutta, percha, whalebone, or a composition that is paper mache. Paper mache, think about that one. I don't think that would last very long if it was paper mache. Now getting back to that 1922 catalog from Ludwig that we saw earlier with the sticks, this Ludwig pad claims to give the same results as obtained from a drum but eliminates the noise. So that's a nickel-plated metal body there with a solid felt center to give proper rebound for the sticks. You can see that felt was some type of material used for rebound on top of a hard surface. Some catalogs weren't as descriptive. In this 1927 Premier catalog, we see that we only have a practice pads, a very useful article for practicing touch. The center is solid felt, once again felt, and gives the proper rebound whilst enabling you to practice silently. Okay. Number 635 was not present in the catalog, so there was no picture to go with that, other than you can call up the company and order number 635. Now here in this 1928 Sling-A-Ling catalog, we can see our typical slanted model of wood with a piece of gum rubber on top. and it says here the Slingerland Practice Pad was designed by Frank Fancher, world's champion rudimental drummer. So you see here, that is the one that resembles the very first pad I bought. If we go back to this 1929 Leedy Roloff catalog, we can see here southeast of the Sticks that we saw earlier, 3 different versions of their practice pad. The one on the right with the stand has a rock-hard maple surface. The one in the center has a gum rubber surface, but yet you can see the slant that mimicked the pad that we saw earlier in my very own first pad. And then one on the left is something like that in the center with a gum rubber center, but it could be placed on top of a table. As we return to the 1933 Leedy catalog, we can see the same type of design of the slanted piece of wood. Number 1760 up on top is a centerpiece of gum rubber there on a slanted piece of wood, and then below that is a double-sided pad. And on one side you would have a felt, as it says here, fiber side, and on the other side is the gum rubber side. Here's another patent dated 1945, granted in 1949 by D. L. Banta, which the pad actually elevates off to an angle and also houses your drumsticks. In the patent itself it says, the top of the lid is provided with a rubber or other resilient pad, which may thus be used as a practice pad by the drummer. And last but not least, another patent that I found, dated in 1963, granted in 1965. As you can see in the patent itself, the body is formed of a resilient material which has characteristics substantially identical to that of a conventional drum head, so that to give the player the feeling that he actually is striking the drum head rather than a practice pad. The material is well suited for this purpose, consists of combination of natural and synthetic rubber, which measures between 45 and 55 on the Shore A durometer. So that was just one piece of solid gum rubber that was just in the shape of maybe perhaps one of those wooden pads that I first got. This is really just like the pad that I used to use for the first couple of years until I joined the grade school band when I was 12 years old. So those 2 years of just me tinkering with a pad and pair of sticks. And I was still practicing the very first thing that my uncle Don Tunzi had showed me, but my pad that I had to buy in grade school band was the Billy Gladstone pad. There was an invention that he made to where when you set it on a drum or a flat surface, you could not, as you can see how I'm taking that pad up with it, but it's a design that has a suction vacuum, okay? The vacuum seal is what he called it. Here it is, vacuum drum pad, and then patent number, and then we'll see it on the screen here as we talk about the history. So the history of Billy Gladstone goes back to a book that I've read from Chet Falzerano, and that is Billy Gladstone, and it has a wealth of knowledge of not only Billy Gladstone himself, but all the inventions over the years of his life. So we can see here in his 1951 patent, his raised surface there on a one-piece gum rubber vacuum seal pad. In other words, it would seal on top of a drum and you would not be able to move it and it would not slip, but it allowed you to practice on a drum without actually having the sound or the loudness of the drum to disturb your neighbors. That concept wasn't really anything entirely new, because in 1937 I found a patent from C.F. Lebo or Lebau. I hope I said that name right and gave him justice, but we have it dated at 1935 but granted in 1937, which consisted of a raised gum rubber surface that had attachments to it, and you would attach those to the rim of your drum, and it would allow you to play in the center there, into that center piece, and still not have the volume that you would normally have with a regular drum, which was very popular because people wanted to try to mimic the drum. They were trying to practice the rudiments and everything like that, and they went to a field drum or a concert drum, and it felt different from the pad that they used. So it was important for manufacturers to come out with a pad that would try to mimic that drum. This is the Billy Gladstone pad. It had a raised surface that you would play, and ideally it would sit on a drum, so it made the drum much quieter. It allowed people to practice on a real drum. That was kind of a thing, you know, instead of a piece of wood and gum rubber. And this happens to all be gum rubber. As we move on to the different types of pads, this pad was patented, this design rather, was patented into 1966, I believe. We'll see it on the screen, the actual date, and talk about the history of that. Here's the patent filed in 1965 from R.D. Belly, granted in 1966. So in the patent you can see an entire drum set of these practice pads, and that was Remo Belly one of the founding fathers of synthetic heads. He was actually the first successful person to manufacture synthetic heads away from calfskin heads, which produce a problem in different climate temperatures. Here you see in the patent to where you have a rim that screwed down onto a base, but in between the rim and the base had a cushion, and then on top was a real drum head. And on this page of the 1968 catalog, you can see that the tensioning rods are actually just screws, and it was a flathead screwdriver that you could use to tightening down the head if you want it. Below that, you can see the stands that could be purchased for those pads. Off to the left is what the pad looked like in its box, and that's what I purchased back when I was 15 in 1990, I would believe. And that pad was bought by my grandfather Albright, and he took me to his favorite music store in Little Rock, Arkansas, and asked me what I'd like out of the store aside from a drum or a drum set. So I chose a 12-inch Remo pad that looks like the one that you're seeing here. Now going back to that 1920s duplex catalog, we can see here a practice pad that it says here, the most essential article for the student and teacher, touch and feeling and the same as a real drum, noise reduced to a minimum. But you can see here there seems to be screws around the rim of that pad, and then perhaps you can tighten it like that of the Remo pad. So this type of tension over a rim is nothing new. And I couldn't verify this. I didn't know if there was a patent out there for it or not. I tried to look for it, but couldn't find it. So I would imagine that this concept of a tunable head on top of a rim that could be tensioned by a screwdriver of some sort would be nothing new. As you can see here, that this pad resembles that of the one that Remo Belli had invented back in the day, and I had one of these pads. That was my very third pad that I ever bought, and how I got that pad was not this particular one, but it was a Remo pad by my grandfather who played the drums. It took me to the music store that he liked to go and visit. You know, he said, what would you like out of the store? And so I was eyeballing that. It was a 12-inch Remo pad. And because what happens here on this is you actually have, you know, of course, again, the drum head sitting on top of some cushion that is tunable. In other words, you can sit there and crank this head down further or not. I really like them. They're a little bit on the loud side, so if you're looking for something quieter, I probably wouldn't recommend it. But I do recommend some type of pad like this. This is really nice because it kind of gives you the idea of what a drum might feel like. It's one of the closest things I would probably suggest. The next pad that I got, actually this is the next pad. This was a smaller version of this. These happens to be the original Real Feel pads, believe it or not. This is what they looked like back in the 90s where they became very popular. And of course, down the road, Diodario, who manufactures drum heads, Evans, and then of course the ProMark brand drumsticks. They acquired HQ Percussion. Then of course the version you're seeing today is their rendition of it. But I am in love with the old version of the Real Feel. So my very first one was, it had gum rubber on one side and then it was just a blank surface on the other. And I couldn't afford both sides. And I can only afford the 8-inch, so it was like 20 bucks, and I said, I got 20 bucks. So that's what I got. Later in San Diego...
Seriously, that was 20 bucks?
Yeah, that was 20 bucks.
That looks like like back then it'd be like $4.
Well, not that long
$5.
ago. I mean, we're talking like 1990... I believe it was 1991 when I got this pad.
Really?
So yeah.
Still, it should be cheap.
Yeah, I practiced the snare drum solo Tornado by Mitch Markovich on this very pad and won districts, and then I went on to state and I took the title for that. A lot of history on this pad. Now, when I went to San Diego, I could afford a better pad, you know, bigger pad, so I had the double-sided Real Feel.
How much was that?
This was, I believe, between 40 and 50 bucks, you know, but this is back in 1999. Okay, so that's how old this pad is, but this was the next pad I bought. Going on, again, like I said, there's different types of pads out there, different types of material, and I personally like either the actual drum head version, you know, or a gum rubber surface on top of wood or some other type of hard substance there. Here, I can't even pick this thing up without it falling apart. I do not recommend anything that has this type of gel substance because it will eventually wear. And I did call up the manufacturer at about a year's usage, noticing how every time I played it would crack and now you're seeing like all kinds of cracks here in the surface. But it would dent and rip and what have you. And the idea for this pad, and remember, there's different purposes for different things. This is for a non-bouncy surface or a non-responsive surface. This is to help you work twice as hard, at your drumming. So when you're practicing your warm-ups or your exercises, a lot of times what I do is I go on to the pillow, and then I transfer it to the drum. So I wanted to get a pad to see if, instead of playing on a pillow, maybe I could, play on something that doesn't have, a rebound. And, this is what this is. I respect things coming out that doesn't have a bouncy surface to it, but don't go buy a pillow. And what I mean by that, a practice pad pillow. In other words, there are practice pads out there that are basically just pillows. And you'll be paying $50 or $60 for it. And that's way too much money to be paying for a pillow. If you need something, go get your old pillow that doesn't have a bounce, and then you just fold it, or you can put it right in your lap. But we'll be talking about that in the next episodes to come. On to the last couple of pads that we have here is the Aquarian. I endorse Aquarian drum heads and their products, and this one right here is called the Super-Pad. It actually fits on the drum, and it allows you to have that somewhat of a real surface feel, not like the other dampening methods like mesh heads or other rubber material that could be put on them, but it's a really nice one. I really like this because you can play brushes with it. As you can tell, it has somewhat of a textured surface like that of a coated drum head. But that's just to give you an example. Again, different types of drum pads used for different reasons, but you can use this for a practice pad. So these run a little bit high. They're about, depending on the diameter that you choose, depends on the, of course, cost. I believe this one might run about $40 or $50. But the pad that I like to use and endorse is the Aquarian Tru Bounce Pad. We talked about that earlier and how they come with a free pair of graphite light sticks. I really like it. It has a very nice gum rubber surface to it. This will be the pad that I'll be using in the future episodes to come. It's affordable, so I believe you can pick up one for about around $40. If you go to aquariandrumheads.com, you'll find out that they'll be selling them on their website. They do offer a discount, so by all means, if you decide to try this pad out, then they can offer you a discount, much like the other retailers out there. If you're at a music store, though, or at a drum shop, which I, of course, encourage you to go to and support, try out some different drum pads out there and make sure that you get something that's affordable and you're not investing a lot of money, but on the other hand, is going to give you what you need. So you want to have a good, responsive surface to them. Now, for the last pad, this right here is actually a piece of gum rubber. And what I did was I went online and I told a manufacturer that was selling gum rubber online, and I said, I'm thinking about making my own drum pad. Is there a sample of gum rubber that I can purchase off of you? And they actually sent it to me for free. So for people who can't even afford, some pads run even as cheap as, $10. But if you can't afford that, you can sit there and take a piece of gum rubber, get some really good adhesive surface material, and glue that on a piece of hardwood. And I actually tried this out. I tried it on, put it on top of a table, and I played, and wow, it felt like the old reel feels. Now, over time, gum rubber does decay. As you can see here, this is 1991, and however many years that is until now. How many years is that, Kai? 2020, 1991, 29 years. So that's 29 years of decay on this gum rubber, and it starts to flake off, and there's not really much of a give in the gum rubber anymore. And this is 1999, so that's, 21 years ago. These gum rubber surfaces do wear out over time. But like I said, take a piece of gum rubber. If you can't afford it or you don't want to invest a lot of money into it, this will do the trick. And take a piece of plywood or any type of hard surface and glue it onto there, and you would have your practice pad. Doesn't even matter what shape. Obviously, circles are kind of the mimic of the drum, but, if you had a square pad, I don't think you'd be that squared.
I don't get it.
Okay. So that wraps up the different types of pads. We also talked about the history of what I found about the pads, but you know, the wild thing about it is I wondered, Kai, what people practiced on prior to the 1900s, like the 1800s and the 1700s, and even prior to that. The earliest I found was that drum pad from 1919 that I showed you, but I really couldn't find anything past that. So I wonder if Kelli Rae Tubbs would know anything. She's an author, a historian, a clinician. She has her Back in Time series where she features different areas of percussion. Let's see if she's available. What do you think?
Yeah, let's call her.
All right, here we go. But let's first get rid of this stuff. What do you think? Can you do this with us? Ready? I'll count us off. 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 and 2. Hey, so, wow, we got rid of that. Yeah. It's my acting son there. So let's go ahead and give her a call, and then we'll see what she has to say about the history of the practice pad.
Yep.
Hello, Kelli. Do you see us okay and hear us okay?
Hello, I can.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking this quick call. We wanted to call you because we understand that you're a historian, and we were wondering what people practiced on back in the 17 and 1800s. Do you know anything about the history of the practice pad?
I do know a little bit about the history of the practice pad, and I've been doing some research lately, and I found some newspaper articles that dated back to 1863, advertising a product that was it was patented in 1862 and was first invented in 1861. Now, just because I found a really early practice pad doesn't mean it was the first one ever invented, but it's pretty early. So it's the first one I know about.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, can you describe the materials used and what this practice pad looked like?
I can. It was 12 inches in diameter, and it was made with 2 pieces of mahogany that were round, and India rubber as a top surface to play on, just like our practice pads today have rubber as the surface. And depending on what rubber they could get and what other materials they could get, either cloth or more rubber in between the 2 pieces of mahogany, and then a strip of leather around the outside to keep it all together.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So they had actual practice pads back in the day. I've always wondered because, you know, in marching band, some people play on the rims, and if you're playing on a Civil War drum, I'm sure you're going to eat up those rims on those wooden hoops. So the one that Kelli was mentioning earlier may resemble something like what I have up on the screen where it straps around your leg, right, Kelli? Does it strap around your leg?
Yeah, that's correct. It would strap onto your knee.
Okay.
There were others that you wore on a cotton sling, just like marching drums used to be worn.
Okay, we got a picture.
So you could walk around and practice with that.
That's
there were
great.
some that had a stand that they would, it would sit. It had 4 legs, and the snare drum or the practice pad surface would tilt in a really severe tilt, which was just like they used to set up their drums in early drum set days.
That's right, yeah.
And other practice pads were designed to sit on top of a table or on top of a drum.
Tell us a little bit, Kelli, about when you first started to play the drums, what kind of sticks did you use, and what was your first practice pad?
Well, I've got my first practice pad right here. Would you like to see it?
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Oh, great. So this was a Ludwig Practice Pad, and I've put a new head on it because I wore right through the old one. And I had to do a repair on the bottom side where it connects to the cymbal stand. But otherwise, it served me really, really well. And but I have a lot of different kinds of practice pads. I can show you them in just a minute.
Yeah,
because
great.
for me, each kind of practice pad serves a different purpose.
That's right.
But back to your question about sticks. The sticks that came with this practice pad were 2B.
Okay.
And that size was just a little bit too big for my hands. And so I went to the local music store and I found some 5B sticks that fit my hands better. And I also liked the feel of that wood better in my hands, because when I used hickory sticks, which is kind of like the gold standard in drumsticks for a lot of people.
Right.
It just felt like there was too much vibration in my hand. And,
Okay.
you know, each person's hands are built differently, and each person holds onto the sticks differently. So for me, what felt better were oak. And I
Oh.
still use oak sticks today.
What would you recommend to a beginning student who wants to go purchase a pair of drumsticks, their very first pair? What would you recommend as a good place to start?
Well, I would say 5B or 2B, something that is along that line, something that's not too skinny and not too fat,
Right.
but something that feels good in their hands. And they just need to try, you know, find a music store who will let them try the different kinds of sticks. If you have somebody who says you can't try them out, then you go to a different store.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. In most places that I've been to always let me try out the sticks, and we mentioned that earlier. So by all means, go out there and pick out your local music store and try out some sticks. One thing, though, that I do know, and this has happened I know there's evidence in the Civil War era, where people, again, we're talking to people around the world here who may or may not have the resources to go to a music store or even purchase a pair of drumsticks, what if they're economically challenged. People back in the Civil War had made their own drumsticks, from what I understand, whittling down branches or whatever they had, you know, rods of some sort. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know about that. I haven't learned that, but I also know that there were a lot of different kinds of craftsmen. So there were people who would have lathes because there were cabinet makers and furniture makers. So they might have a furniture maker in town where they lived, or they might whittle something down.
Yeah.
You know, I think that one of the most important things about musicians and artists as a rule, but especially musicians, is that we improvise. That, you know, that's a really important part of being a musician, is being able to find a solution when it doesn't look like there is one.
That's right, and that's how the birth of the drum set came about, which we'll be talking about much later down the road. But you had mentioned you had some practice pads you wanted to show us and the different uses of them.
I do. Let me see what I've got here. So we were talking about that practice pad from 1862 being able to strap onto your knee. This one also has a little Velcro strap at the bottom that you can just kind of sit down on a park bench if you're traveling or something and have a flat surface to practice on.
Yeah.
And I've got this little practice pad, which is really easy for me to travel with when I'm on a plane. So it takes up such a small amount of space. It's got such a small surface, and when I'm trying to be very precise about where I'm using my drumstick, I practice with this.
Can you mention the name of the brand of that practice pad?
Yep. This practice.
The small one.
Yep, both of these. This is a head.
That's the manufacturer.
Yep. And this is Wicked Chops.
Wicked Chops.
And that's also distributed by a head.
Okay, yeah, and that's a different type of a practice pad that allows you to focus on being precise at your drum playing, because one thing that teachers have told their students over the years is you don't want your sticks, you know, weaving in and out. You want to have a nice central playing point, which kind of like maybe this is why Gladstone developed his raised 6-inch epicenter here of the pad. So that's amazing. Any other pads do you have?
I do. I also use this, which is a Real Feel by Evans.
It looks just like a real pad.
Well, so Real Feel originated here in St. Louis
Really?
under HQ Percussion, and Diodario bought out HQ Percussion, and that's what you're seeing as the new one. We showed earlier of the pad how it used to look. How about some other pads that you have in store?
I've got one more here that I can show you. It's a very old Ludwig.
Wow.
So it's designed to either go on a cymbal stand, or these cups allow it to sit on a table. Kind of suction cups, so they stick there.
Cool.
And then it's got the slanted top, so it simulates when you're wearing a drum.
That's right. Really fascinating information, Kelly. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And you have some projects now that's in the works. Would you like to tell the audience a little bit about what you have going on now for you? I had a great introduction earlier, but Go ahead.
Yeah, I would love to. I have one more thing to show you,
Oh,
though.
okay.
We'll save that for the end.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
Okay, so yeah, I'm in the middle of writing a book with drummer, author, educator Daniel Glass, and we're writing it about the drummers who were drumming in America and across the world from 1900 to 1930. And we're looking at all of the old equipment that they used back then and how the drum set was developing, and we can see it in these pictures.
That's
And it is exciting. I'm really delighted about that.
Yeah.
And I'm on my way to a big 3-month-long performance in Tennessee.
Okay.
So I'm going to be playing percussion on that, not drum set, but I'll be playing mallet percussion and sound effects and conga drums and all sorts of things, triangles and shakers and a lot of jingle bells.
Yeah. Well, that's right, because it's a holiday show from what I understand. Your Back in Time series, for those that you want to go check out her Back in Time series, the link's provided down there and the show more comments, as well as her other information, such as her website, KelliRaeTubbs.com, correct?
That's correct.
All right, yeah, and it's KelliRaeTubbs.com. And we'll have all those links down at the bottom. But you had something to show us, though, because I know you have a lot of things going on, and we don't want to take any too much of your time, but we appreciate your time as is. But what exactly you had to show us?
I've got a pair of really old drumsticks to show you.
Oh, okay.
Now, they are from the early 1900s. It's going to be maybe hard to see.
Okay.
But they are made of, let's see, I'll show you the tips of these sticks. It's very different size tips from what we're used to seeing. Mm-hmm. And the length of these sticks, pull one up here, is just a little bit longer than a typical stick.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah. We'll make sure we get a close-up on those beads. You know, those resemble the same sticks that we showed earlier with the 5 that I had in the shadow box with the other two drumsticks. And so what I've noticed is that there are Are there any inconsistencies that you notice on the sticks that you have, like the bead might be the different size as the other, or?
Yeah, they were definitely hand done. There's just a small difference between the two, so you know it wasn't done by a machine.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, because technology now, we explained, has improved to where they're pitch matched and weight balanced and all that stuff, especially with companies like Vickford. That's amazing, Kelly. That's great. How did you pick those drumsticks up?
It was really luck. I went to a secondhand store and I saw this pair of drumsticks and I picked them up. They're very heavy and they look weird, right? And I had never seen any from this age. So I picked them up and it's like, oh, I don't want these. These are too heavy. Yeah. Well, they're heavy because they're made of rosewood.
That's right.
So, which is a very dense wood. And then I saw a photo when I was looking through these photos of the early 1900s drummers, and it's like, oh my goodness, there's a reason why those sticks don't look normal, right? Yeah. It's because they're really old. And I went back to the store. This was like 4 or 5 weeks later, and they were still there because everybody else who picked them up, I'm sure, thought, oh, these are so heavy. So, I got because they had been at the store for so long, they were on a 25% discount. So I paid $2.34 for them.
Wow.
That's, I know.
Yeah, they're in good hands now because you appreciate the history and you know where they came from. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and thank you for sharing your information about the history of the practice pad and a little bit about what you're doing. And we really appreciate you, Kelly, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. I love having opportunities like this where I can help somebody just learn a little tidbit, just one little thing. If you, and that's how I kind of spend my day. If I can learn one little thing during the day, it will help me going forward. So I hope that together you and I can help somebody learn something today. Well, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you so much. We bid you farewell and best wishes on your upcoming show in the next few months. Thank you. And definitely best wishes on your new book coming out with the great Daniel Glass. Check him out as well.
and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. That was pretty wild with the pad from 1861, right? I mean, I can't believe that they actually had practice pads back then, and I would imagine so. Well, thank you so much for joining the very first episode of Learning to Drum. I'm your host, Adam Tevlin, and now with my son, Kai Tevlin, we just want to encourage you to go out to that music store or that drum shop. Try out some sticks. Try out some practice pads. We'll see you next time on episode 2. We'll be talking about how to hold those sticks and some different techniques of how to stroke the drum. Until then, always remember to keep swinging those sticks.
Bye.
Bye.